that time, I consider the years I spent on I Love Lucy to be perhaps the biggest rip-off of my career.
At that point, I think the years I worked on I Love Lucy were probably the worst of my career. Fred and Ethel Mertz, played by Vivian Vance and William Frawley, were liked by many as neighbors on I Love Lucy from 1951 to 1957. Behind the scenes, Vance hated Frawley even though they got along well on TV. Their friendship turned into one of the most famous fights in Hollywood. Hollywood tried to hide the story of what happened behind the scenes for years. You'll understand why Vivian could never forget Frawley once you know what he did. Before you skip ahead, please be aware that this story is going to be much more serious than normal. This is something you shouldn't miss. The first day on set when everything started, Lucy Ball is getting ready for her brand new TV show I Love Lucy, which as we all know became a huge hit. But no one knew that at the time. They were just putting the puzzle pieces together one at a time. Lucy had a clear idea of what she wanted to do because she was a boss babe. She was sure of who she wanted to play Ethel Mertz. Her first pick was Bethie Benadret, who is very talented. But surprise, Bethie had plans, and was busy. She was unable to complete the task. What a shame. Yes, Lucy then moved on and thought, okay, plan B. Why not get in touch with Mary Wicks? They were close friends, and Mary was smart enough to pull it off. But Mary said no, not because she didn't want the job but because she cared too much about their friendship. She basically turned it down to keep things from getting weird between them. Allow us a moment to admire that level of devotion. Who does that these days? At the same time, Desi Arnaz, Lucy's husband, was really taking part behind the scenes. He wasn't just Ricky Ricardo. Believe me, he had a lot of power in the production and worked hard to make sure the right people were cast. People might get along better if they worked on one of the most popular TV shows ever. Yes, but something was going on behind the scenes of I Love Lucy. Fans didn't see that coming. Vance didn't like William Frawley at all. And we're not talking about a few fights here and there. This was filled with hate. But the real question is why two actors who played a nice married couple on screen couldn't be in the same room together when the cameras stopped rolling. Wait until we tell you the real reason Vance didn't like Frawley. Then you'll never watch I Love Lucy the same way again. And believe me, the finish is crazy. In the past, Lucy worked with the great character actor James Gleason on the movie Miss Grant Takes Richmond. She thought he'd be great as Fred Mertz. They were getting along professionally and she saw promise. What went wrong with that though? He asked for $3,500 per show in pay. Do you really believe that? That was a lot of money back then. It was like no way, the company said. We're back to square one again. All of a sudden 64-year-old vaudeville star William Frawley shows up out of nowhere. He has been in almost 100 movies. This man was a whole company. He came right away, without waiting to be called. Not at all. He called Lucy himself when he picked up the phone. CBS? Oh no, they wouldn't have it. They did not want him. Some people said that Frawley liked to drink a lot. Okay, a heavy drinker. Arnaz, however, spoke up for him. He really did fight for this guy. There was a catch though. Desi had Frawley sign a document that basically said if you show up drunk you're out. Always. Very strict love. I agreed with Frawley. His desire for the part was that strong. Age gap and problems with how you look. Like, did you know that the actors who played Fred and Ethel Mertz really didn't get along? Yes? Not joking. And the craziest part is that a big part of their anger came from the fact that they were 22 years apart in age. William Frawley was 64 years old when the show began, but Vivian Vance was only 42. Ooh, that's not just a little, oh he's a little older than me thing. Ooh, there is a big age difference there. He might as well have been her dad instead of her husband. To be honest, Vivian really did feel that way. At first they got along well with each other. There is no drama or fireworks. But then Vivian saw something she couldn't take her eyes off of. When she saw herself, she thought she was still very young, beautiful, and in her prime. But then she saw Frawley, who was grumpy and clearly getting older, and she would think, really? Is this my husband from the show? She once said it out loud during practice. No one will believe that I'm married to that old pig. Also, guess what? She talked to Frawley. Oh no. Can you picture the stress that followed? But really, who could blame her? She was a skilled actress in her early 40s, just getting into her stride, and she had to be paired with a guy who looked more like an uncle than a life partner. Lucille Ball, her best friend on set, was playing the beautiful and lively wife of the very good-looking Desi Arnaz. The difference was very clear, and the people who run the show didn't help her out. They went out of their way to make her look bad. Worse clothes, worse makeup, and nothing that looks good on her at all. They were successful in making Ethel look plain next to Lucy, but by doing that they slowly hurt Vivian's confidence and, to be honest, possibly her sanity as well. Don't forget that Vivian and Lucy were pretty close in age in real life. Vivian must have thought it was a mean joke. Here's your friend getting to be the pretty wife in fun stories, while you have to be the old lady in a boring, unbelievable marriage to a man old enough to get Social Security. It's not just for show. It has to do with your pride, your career, and the parts you keep getting. That is more than just annoying. It breaks my heart. Who is the audience? They did notice too. People began to talk. Some people even said that Fred and Ethel's marriage looked completely fake, like a bad relationship with no sex. Oh, and Vivienne? Oh, that's how she felt. It was like eating a mouthful of sour lemon juice every time she had to film a scene where she had to show love for Frawley. She would just refuse to kiss him. She learned how to air kiss. You know, the ones that look pretty real on camera but don't involve any lip touch at all. In the episode Equal Rights, they are supposed to kiss in a jail cell in one scene. Pay close attention. There wasn't even a kiss. There was awkward cold body language and an eye roll that said, "I can't believe I have to do this again." Now let's talk about Frawley. He wasn't really letting this go. No. He was spoiled. He would go out of their way to make sure that the writers were mean to Ethel. They would write lines that made fun of her looks, like calling her body a trunk full of doorknobs. Wild, right? The interesting thing is that it worked. It made the show even funnier how tense things were between them. They were arguing with real things, so it felt real. Don't call that acting. The crowd loved that because it was pure hatred wrapped up in a story. But deep down, you hate that kind of negativity. Vivian liked more than just the jokes and the silly outfits. It had to do with being permanently attached to a character and connection that made her feel very bad. She couldn't get away from the ugly shadow of this older man's wife, Ethel Mertz, no matter how far she ran in her career. That part stuck to her like shoelaces to gum. And every time she thought about I Love Lucy, it wasn't just the laughs and the success. She knew what she had to give up in order to keep that part alive. It was a big deal. A huge chance, and money on the table when CBS came to them with the idea of a Mertz's spin-off. They gave a bonus of $50,000 just to get it done. What Vivian said was no, not taking place, not for money or love. She just couldn't hang out with Frawley for longer without Lucy and Desi being there to keep her safe. It would be awful to turn down that much money because you don't want to work with that person again. That tells you everything. That's why it's true when people say their on-screen relationship was famous, but it cost something. Behind all the laughs and show magic, Vivian lived with a very real, very raw pain every day. Not only was there a 22-year age difference, but there were also missed chances, low self-esteem, and work problems that didn't go away after the cameras stopped rolling. Isn't it crazy how sometimes the best TV comes from real-life pain? This makes you wonder where other popular shows are. Yes, on I Love Lucy, Fred and Ethel Mertz would fight like an old married couple, which we all love to see. But what if I told you that the strain wasn't just for show? Vance didn't just dislike William Frawley though. She hated him. No one really knew why for years. Fans guessed. It was a big deal. But the truth was hidden until now. What did it mean? Was Frawley really that bad? Did Vance do too much? Or did this fight have more to it than just a bad working relationship? Don't think it's just a silly old Hollywood fight. Stay with us until the end, because the whole story is more interesting than any show plot, with dirty looks and insults. At first there was just a quiet, awkward vibe. But then it blew up into one of the most famous feuds in the history of great TV, and to be honest, things got bad really quickly. This is what happened. You're on the set of I Love Lucy, one of the most famous shows of all time. Instead of getting to know each other and having fun making people laugh, you look at each other funny while you're shooting and passive-aggressively jab each other. You can't wait for the day to end so you don't have to deal with them anymore. Very much so for Vivienne and William. who played Fred and Ethel Mertz, a pair who fought all the time. The crowd laughed at their fights on screen, but behind the scenes, oh honey, it was pure chaos wrapped in old Hollywood anger. When Vivian Vance, who played Ethel, said something rude about not liking being paired sexually with that old man, she probably thought it was funny, but it was still fishy. That was not funny at all to William Frawley, who played Fred. The man was mad. After that there was war. Father of Greg Oppenheimer was the show's main writer and director. He said Frawley took it personally, which was all it took to turn things around. It gets worse though. Frawley wasn't the type to be quiet and keep to himself, not at all. In Hollywood, he was known for being rough, rude, and just plain mean, especially to women. Aubrey Kupferberg, who helped write Meet the Mertzes, said he was known for being mean to women, and he had a drinking problem and a rage that could melt steel. It's easy to see why he and Vivian couldn't get along. At one point, he even used very bad words to talk about her. The C word was used in an interview, and it wasn't funny. Yes, their fight was Hollywood's worst kept secret. Everyone knew. It was more than just whispers. It was right in the middle for everyone who spent even 5 minutes on set. Even though they were being rude, they somehow managed to act in a very professional way. They came to work, said their lines, and didn't let the hate get in the way of the show. You could feel it in the air though. When Fred and Ethel were on screen together, it seemed like there was tension that wasn't being acted. It was true, pure anger that looks like funny. That's what made their scenes so exciting. Anyone ever watch a movie fight between two people and think, damn, this feels a little too real? That was Ethel and Fred. In between lines, Frawley loved making fun of Ethel's looks or annoying habits. Vance, who wasn't easily swayed, answered back with lines like old fat Freddy. Also, these lines weren't always in the plot. They said those things because they really didn't like them. It was small, it felt real, but it looked good on screen. What's really strange, some people who study the history of TV think that this deep, almost funny anger might have made the show even better. Their non-stop fighting felt so real because, well, it was. Their figures didn't have feelings for each other because TV in the 1950s was more serious than today. It was a clear sign of how badly they hated being together, but still it worked like magic. It makes sense. Yes, but let's not act like they ever planned to put the fight behind them. Once I Love Lucy was over, CBS tried to make Fred and Ethel their own show. This is where it gets funny. William Frawley said, okay, let's do it. Probably thinking about the money coming in. But Vivian, no, sis turned that off right away. She said she would never work with him again, and that was the end of it. Not a meeting. Don't put on a fake smile for the camera. Just say for sure that it's not from Vance. Really, who could blame her? It wasn't like other TV feuds where people just didn't get along. People were really angry with each other for years, through 6 seasons, and people still talk about it today. This is the kind of fight that leaves scars on Hollywood history. It is kind of funny when you think about it, isn't it? Every week they made people laugh, and their chemistry helped make I Love Lucy a classic. But they couldn't even share a dressing room without making each other laugh. Still they stuck with it and did the work, and even though things were tough and angry, they gave us some of the most famous TV moments ever. It's funny how the worst relationships at work can sometimes lead to the best art. I mean, how does that happen? But hey, maybe that's just how show business works. Love and hate are mixed up, and even the worst pairings make the screen brighter. The follow-up that didn't happen. It's 1957. And I Love Lucy is coming to an end after changing the way TV shows are made. It was the show, not just a show. It was sad, funny, crazy, and just dramatic enough to keep people interested. Most people watched for Lucy's antics and Ricky's charm, but Fred and Ethel Mertz were really interesting. Do you get what I mean? That grumpy old owner and his sassy wife were both funny in their own right. They fought all the time, but she found it cute. So you can imagine how excited everyone was when CBS and Desilu Studios brought up this great idea. What if Fred and Ethel had their own show? Really? Can you picture it? This wasn't just a thought that came to mind during lunch. Not at all. This was a real idea with a lot of support. One of the biggest networks, CBS and Desilu, the huge production company run by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Yeaple, were both behind it. Desi himself went up to William Frawley and Vivian Vance and said, hey guys, it was very exciting. Let's shine a light on Fred and Ethel for a while. The pitch was clear, honest, and to be honest, pretty great. It was ripe for growth. It's clear that people loved the Mertzes. They were funny and cute together, and their love-hate relationship made I Love Lucy even better. They were that normal couple next door. They fought over silly things but stood by each other when it mattered. Producers knew they had a hit show because people loved them. They thought of many things. It would be fun for Fred and Ethel to move to Los Angeles or Albuquerque and get into new trouble. They might see people they know, like Carolyn and Charlie Appleby. They might meet new people to argue with. There were a lot of options. The actor who played Fred was all for it. He saw it as a second chance at steady, long-term work in a business that wasn't always good to actors over the age of 50. In other words, the man was smart. He was in his 70s and had been in theater and movies before. He knew how important it was to stay current in a TV world that was changing quickly. This wasn't just a creative project for him. This was staying alive. It's not his fault that he jumped at the chance, but this is where it all falls apart. Oh boy, it's messy. Vivian Vance, who played our beloved Ethel, flatly said no, and not in a let me think about it way. Not at all. Without a doubt she said no. She didn't just shut the door, you know. Then she locked it, threw away the key, and set fire to the whole house. The best part is now here. They gave her a lot of money. Huge bonus checks the size of fists. The kind of money that would make most people stop and think for a second. Vivian, on the other hand, did not move. What's going on? Why would someone turn down a sure thing that will make them a lot of money? The answer is both juicy and sad. To begin with, she didn't like William Frawley. Years of building up stress, insults that are meant to be hurtful but not mean, and just plain dislike. She put up with him during I Love Lucy, possibly because Lucy and Ricky were always there to make things less tense. She didn't like the idea of working with him alone every week though. Imagine having to spend every day with someone who makes you angry, with no escape in sight. She also didn't believe the Mertzes could run a show by themselves. That's a really smart and self-aware point of view. She knew that the magic of I Love Lucy came from the four of them working together. Lucy and Ricky's lives with Fred and Ethel were funny, but she didn't think they were funny as stars. She really thought that the show would not work without all of the actors getting along, and to be honest, she might have been right. But let's look further. While she was in that New York brownstone, Vivian was also thinking about her future outside of that set. She had helped Lucy for many years. It's funny, but it's always second fiddle, always the funny part, always the other woman, when it comes to lights and attention. The playwright Kim Powers even said she began to think, is this all I'll ever be? Just a helper. You know that kind of self-doubt can really get to someone. It's not even about pride. It's about trying to get better, try new things, and get out of the box that the business world keeps putting you in. But oh, the damage. It wasn't just irritation that made Frawley so angry. He saw this as more than just Vivian turning down a show. It was her turning down his chance to be financially stable, stay important, and maybe even retire in comfort. Being turned down made things worse, since he didn't like her to begin with. It was already a bad situation, but things really went bad between them. It was almost like you could hear the door slam between them. The most sad part, it might have been TV history. People who study history have even said that they were like the Ropers in the 1950s, like that owner couple from Three's Company, who had their own hit show that was based off of them. That was possible for both Fred and Ethel. That chance never came true though, because of this long-running fight. In other words, this wasn't just a missed chance, because two people couldn't stand each other. It was one of the most famous what could have been moments in TV history. It kind of makes you think, yes, do you know how many great things have never happened, because people couldn't get past their own problems? That's pretty crazy, right? We'll never know what Fred and Ethel's show would have been like. It could have been a terrible movie, or it could have been a great one. However, we do know that beneath the jokes and smiles on black and white sitcoms, real-life stress was slowly but surely changing the course of TV history. There was no getting along between Vivian Vance and William Frawley. This is not a small amount of stress. There was full-on anger that went on for years, but when Frawley died, people thought Vance would say something nice, or at least polite,
What did she say instead? Everyone was shocked. Hang on, because at the end of this movie, you'll hear the Hollywood response that made everyone quiet. How Vance felt when Frawley died. It seems like that would be the end of William Frawley's life, after he died on March 3, 1966. Yes? No though. His death wasn't just the end of an important Hollywood figure. It softly ended one of the ugliest, longest running, and impossible to make up feuds in the history of TV. Who was the other person in this famous fight? Vivian Vance, who played Ethel to his Fred on I Love Lucy. Really, can you picture spending more than 10 years acting nice on TV with someone you hated in real life? That was how they worked together. 15 years of grinding their teeth together, while smiling, and privately wishing they were on different planets. Who'll buckle up? Vivian Vance said, when Frawley's heart stopped beating at age 79. This is what happened. Someone told Vivian that Frawley had died, while she was enjoying a nice meal at a diner. You might now expect a quiet nod, a thoughtful pause, or even a nice, "Oh dear." No though, Miss Vance didn't miss a beat. She shook her glass and yelled, "Champagne for everyone." Do you really believe that? What do you mean? That was more than just a response. That dropped the mic. It was like decades of anger were let out faster than a champagne bottle could be opened. This wasn't just a casual comment said in private either. It was loud. It was open to everyone. People in Hollywood started talking about it all the time, almost overnight. Now, before anyone calls her cold or uncaring, let's look at what made her act that way. It wasn't just about one bad day on set, or some mean comments. Not at all. We had to deal with Frawley's drinking, bad temper, and general bad attitude for years, which made working with him very hard. She put up with his slurred insults, his unreliable behavior, and the fact that he had no social graces at all. People say that time heals all scars. Yes, not this time though. It's not for Vivian. It seemed like the wound got worse the longer their roles kept them together. And this is what makes it really crazy. When he died, the show hadn't been on for almost 10 years. 10 years. You might have thought that some of the pain would have gone away. That just maybe, time and space would have made things easier. But no, after they stopped working together, that man stayed in her head for 10 years for free. And it wasn't with love. That's what I want to say. You could tell that just saying his name made her feel something because of how quickly and sharply she reacted. Still feeling that pain. That anger was still just below the surface, ready to come to the surface, and it did. Also, let's not forget that they looked great together. People all over America loved their landlords, Fred and Ethel Mertz. People loved their energy, even though they fought a lot. People who saw them thought their fights on screen were funny, but it was very real behind the scenes. That stress wasn't doing anything. It was two people barely putting up with each other, while pulling off perfect comedic timing. That seems pretty crazy to think about. They couldn't even look each other in the eye when they weren't on TV. It really makes you think, how badly does someone have to bother you every day for you to want to enjoy their death? And what kind of person stays that angry for so long? It's clear that Vance never got the resolution she needed. There was no "let's put the past behind us" moment, or age-related mellowing. There was only pure raw anger. Her famous champagne speech wasn't just a small insult. It was the end of a fight she didn't want to have, but had to because of circumstances. Like, picture being tied down at work to someone who makes you miserable every day for 15 years. That's not just stress from work, that's war on the emotions. What's worse than that? They never got along again. There was not even a hint of it. Something very sad about that makes you think about it. Two people who were in such an important part of TV history, and who made a lot of people laugh and feel good, were secretly very unhappy. People only saw the magic at the end. They never saw the storm going on behind the scenes. But that one-off toast with champagne for everyone line pulled the curtain back in the most direct way possible. It wasn't just a joke. That was 5 words that let out a lifetime of anger. It may have been quiet when William Frawley died, but it wasn't so quiet afterward. Because of how she answered, Vivian Vance made it clear to everyone that she was done holding on to that anger. She put it down, popped the cork, and did what she could to make it disappear. And to be honest, it was the most honest goodbye that Hollywood had ever seen. This is the end of the movie. Thanks for seeing. If you liked this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to get more. Click on the movie that comes up next to read more exciting stories.